Well, we're a little over 3 months away from the biggest tax hike in history. And the fight on Capitol Hill over the Bush tax cuts, well, it just gets more and more confusing. First, we had House Minority Leader Boehner signaling he might support a limited extension of the Bush tax cuts. And now more Senate Democrats have jumped on the extend them all bandwagon. So what gives? Congressman Darrell Issa is a Republican from California. He joins me now from Capitol Hill. Welcome, Congressman. Good to see you.
Well, good to be back on, and good to be talking about an important subject like how much of your money the government seems to need to endlessly take and how much more they'd like to take.
It's one of our favorite topics, I have to say, but I want you to listen to a statement from the president this afternoon from the Rose Garden, what he had to say about the Republicans. Listen to this.
Right now, we could decide that every American household would receive a tax cut on the first $250,000 of their income. But once again, the leaders across the aisle are saying no. They want to hold these middle-class tax cuts hostage until they get an additional tax cut for the wealthiest 2% of Americans.
So, Congressman, is your party holding the tax cuts hostage?
You know, the American people deserve to be taxed fairly across the board. I'm old enough to remember, I mean, a little bit unlike the president, I remember 1986 when the top tax bracket came down, but the actual amount paid by the tax bracket payers went up. And that was a time in which deficits were very small. Since that time, since 1986, we have steadily raised taxes. Whether we lower or whether we raise or don't raise the taxes in January, they will still be higher than they were in 1986, and the deficit will be about 10 times what it was in 1986.
That's not encouraging.
So let's be honest. It's the growth of government, not the inadequacy of the amount that's taxed, that's doing it. Every American is paying more today than they did in 1986, where government has grown faster.
It sure feels that way. I want to bring up something else to you here on the topic of Obama speaking today on taxes. It's not just Republicans who are questioning his policy on this score. In fact, 5 Democrats are saying, hey, we can't go with you on this one. We want to extend the Bush tax cuts. Look at this. Senator Bayh, Senator Conrad, Senator Nelson, Webb, Lieberman. I mean, you're looking at some real power players here who are saying, we just can't get behind this. What does this tell you?
Well, what it tells you is people like Joe Lieberman understand that Connecticut companies and Connecticut people who represent people selling their businesses all over the country may work 20 or 30 years making $250,000 or less per year, and then they sell their business and they get a 1-year payday of, let's say, $5 million, $3 million. Well, that 1 year, the president wants to take an inordinate amount of money by raising the capital gains rate on the work of a lifetime. So it's not just $250,000 or some hypothetical figure. He's talking about people's lifetime, entire generations of their effort being taxed at a higher rate. And that's part of the problem is government forgets it's your money and it's our growth, excessive growth, that's causing us to take and still have a deficit.
Yeah, it's in fact the child tax credit, it's the death tax, it's the marriage penalty, it's a whole lot of things. I've got to ask you, before we get to the topic of FOIA, I have to ask you, though, what will the House do? If Democrats in the Senate are bailing, will they also bail in the House? Could the House, in fact, also not support the president on this score?
I think Democrats will join with Republicans in saying that this is no time to have a tax increase on anyone, including the employers, the small businessmen, the people who are creating wealth and creating jobs in this country, or at least trying to. So I think Democrats are going to join with Republicans. You know, when Leader Boehner was asked this hypothetical question, he never got to answer the hypothetical of what would you like to do? What is it you think is right? Because what he thinks is right, I'm sure, is that we shouldn't raise taxes at a time in which we need employers to make investments and to be compensated if those investments pay off.
I've got to get you to this introduction of legislation today, I believe you made on the topic of FOIA, Freedom of Information from the SEC. Apparently the SEC doesn't have to share information. Why are you fighting this?
Well, first of all, it's a very bipartisan fight. I've got Leahy in the Senate leading the charge on a nearly identical bill. What we're really trying to do, and we've been trying to do ever since this, in our opinion, mistake happened in Barney Frank, Chris Dodd's bill, is we're trying to put things back where they were prior to this, quote, financial reform that gave the SEC the ability not to answer Fox or anybody else's questions on, for example, Bernie Madoff. You know, the guy's already in jail, and they're still refusing to allow freedom of information because it pretty much it shows where they fouled up. The FOIA system is used by the press, it's used by watchdog organizations, and right now the SEC has a blank check to say no at all times. And it's absurd in this Congress to undo something that in the past has been supported on a bipartisan basis. And that's why I think you've got Democrats leading in the Senate, you've got my bill in the House with plenty of bipartisan support, where we're pushing to make this go back to where it was before the bill. If they want to talk about limited FOIA exemptions, let's do that with committee oversight and time in the next Congress, not undo it in the dark of night on a bill that was moving that they just tapped it onto.
So much for transparency. Darrell Issa, thank you so much for your
Absolutely.
time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. You're most welcome.